you're pretty sick and tired of the whole primaries, the debates, and sometimes even now the violent reactions between partisans of different candidates. It is dispiriting as an American to see candidates for a high office as the presidency attacking one another personally so much, and so little being said about issues that are very important for us in the future. It's dispiriting to see that, because there's a basic distinction that's not being honored. And that's, we have an ability and a responsibility to use our judgment to judge what the issues are, or whether something is right or wrong, or whether something is a sin, etc. But there's a difference between judging an issue and condemning a person. It's a very big difference, very big difference. Jesus is caught in this kind of a struggle by the trap made by the authorities in the New Testament and in this scene from John's Gospel. It's a trap, basically, for Jesus politically, because if he follows the Mosaic law and says yes to the stoning of this woman, he is breaking Roman law, which reserves the death penalty, capital punishment, only to the governor. Of course, we know what the governor's punches Pilate. And we know that when Jesus was going to be condemned, they bring him to Pilate because they don't have the right under Roman law to actually administer capital punishment of any kind. And so this is definitely a trap for Jesus politically. But Jesus uses it, as he does so many things. He always uses the things that happen as a form of teaching, like any good teacher does. They'll take what's right in front of us and begin to use it for the benefit of their students. So what did Jesus do? Here was this woman, very embarrassed, taken from the very act of adultery. Parenthetically, where's the guy? The guy obviously wasn't arrested, wasn't taken before. The poor woman was, which I think is a sign of the patriarchal system that was in effect at that point. But she was dragged embarrassingly before the people because in Mosaic law, she needed to be stoned to death. If you go to Israel, you notice that because of the limestone makeup of the actual geology there, there's a lot of rocks everywhere because they break off very easily. And so you can see why stoning became the preferred method of execution. It's all over the place, these rocks just gathered together, and you can kill someone. But it's a particularly difficult way of dying because there's no executioner. In this form of capital punishment, the community kills you. Everyone just grabs a rock and the whole community attacks you. It's psychologically a very frightening way of dying. And so there's this woman and a situation of entrapment for Jesus. And what does Jesus do? Very uncharacteristic. He de-emphasizes the drama of the moment. And he sits down on the ground and begins to doodle on the ground. What is he writing? Well, some of the fathers in the church said one thing that was actually picked up by Cecil B. DeMille in the silent version of King of Kings. They said he was writing down the sins of the people looking, because he knew their sins. And he was writing down and pointing to people as they considered their own sinfulness. But we don't really know. Most likely he was scribbling on the ground to say to the authorities that were doing this, you think this is so important? Just listen. It was a way of derailing the drama. So when they press him even more, he says the famous, people, not even Christians, but everyone knows the statement, let the person who has no sin be the first to cast the stone. It's a powerful statement because we're all sinners, and the people of the time knew that as well. And so you could probably hear the thud of the rocks being dropped as people walked away, realizing he did it again. He got out of this trap. Somehow he got out of this trap. And so it says in the scripture, he's left alone with the woman. Another Mosaic law. A man was never allowed to speak to a woman, either privately or publicly, who was not related to him. It has to be a wife, a mother, a daughter, a cousin, someone. Obviously, this woman was not, and was a woman that was tainted in the community's eyes. But Jesus waits till they're all gone. And in a very, I want to use the word gentlemanly way, says to the woman, where are they? Hasn't anyone condemned you? And she probably, who was probably huddled, holding her head, waiting for a shower of stones, looks around and says, no one, except Jesus, who was sinless, who could have thrown the first stone, but did not. And so he says to her very gently, neither do I condemn you. This is Jesus. This is God. Neither do I condemn you. Go and don't do this sin again. That is such a beautiful way of putting it. First of all, he acknowledges it was a sin. Adultery is a very, very painful and serious sin. Jesus did not say adultery is okay, you can just relax, everybody's doing it. He wasn't a libertine in that sense. But he warned the woman that it's a sin, but didn't condemn the woman. He made a judgment about the behavior, said it was a sin, adultery is a sin, but he does not condemn her. In fact, in an act of mercy, he just lets her go. No punishment, just the advice not to do this sin again. Mercy transforms. What mercy says is that no matter what we do, it's not the last word. Everyone can change. A new beginning is possible for anyone. It's very much the essence of our faith. And I remember hearing someone say to me at one point, I don't believe that people change, ever. And I said to him, you really need to leave this religion then. Because Christianity is based on our ability to change. And so the act of mercy that Jesus gave her was the beginning of possibly a great change in her life. We don't know what happened to her. Some people think that she was Mary Magdalene. We don't know that. It doesn't say that in the gospel. But it's a possibility, and maybe a probability, that her life turned around at that point. The act of mercy. Remember in the movie and the play Les Mis, it's a great moment when the bishop, Jean Valjean steals silver and runs away and betrays, in a sense, the bishop who was trying to help him. And they catch him and they bring him back. And all they need from the bishop to say, yeah, he stole the stuff. But the bishop knew that he would be put to prison forever because of this. So what does he do? He says, oh, I gave that to him. And he says to Jean Valjean, you know what? You forgot these candlesticks too. I wanted to give those to you as well, but you left so quickly. They let him go. And that act of mercy changed Jean Valjean. He began to realize the power of love and forgiveness. And it changed his whole life. And maybe it changed this woman's life as well. That simple act of mercy. We often judge people. We judge people in our family. We judge, it's not so much the thing, the sin. We're all able to make judgments about things, behaviors and stuff. Nothing's wrong with that because but when we go from the issue involved to the person, we make a leap that's forbidden. Only God can do that. Only God can condemn a human being because God knows the heart. Because when somebody does even such an act like adultery, we don't know what the history was. Even when there's a court of law, if you've ever been to court and realized that the proceedings in a court, it's very complex, going down into motivation and allowing the accused the ability to say something, to defend themselves, whether by their own words or the lawyer's words. But we often condemn with absolutely no evidence, and we condemn often in a way that the person can't respond, can't defend themselves. We, in our court of our heads, judge people, and that's it. So often the person doesn't even know they've been judged. But we walk around judging each other and condemning each other. And that is not the way of Christ. It is not the way of Jesus. There is always the possibility of change. And the minute we close that door and say no change is possible, then we leave the Christian faith. Because we believe in change. And we believe that people can change for the better at any point in their life. Even the most hardened person can do that. I remember when I was a newly ordained priest, a doorbell rang in the rectory in the middle of the night, 2 a.m. So I did the Brooklyn intercom. I opened the window and I yelled out, "What do you want?" And the guy says, I have to go to confession. I says, "It's 2 a.m. Can you come back in the morning?" He says, "No, I have to do it now." So I came down, I got dressed in my black clothes. So I go downstairs, I open the door first there's 2 doors, outer door and inner door. So I went between them, which was like a parlor area, and I kept the inner door closed so he wouldn't go upstairs. But even the outer door I didn't want open because it was a typical setup for a robbery. And so I opened the latch, I put the little latch on, and says, "What can I do for you?" He says, "I want to go to confession." I says, "Well, I'm listening." And he said to me, "Would Jesus do that?" So I said, "This guy's good." So I let him in, and I said, "Well, at least the door's there. He's not going to go upstairs." So he starts his confession, and he begins with the words, "I just got out of prison." My heart sank. I said, "What did I just do?" Well, without revealing too much, he hadn't been to confession in 30 years. And it was really, truly a confession. He says, "I'm sorry I woke you up, but I knew if I didn't do it right now, I would chicken out again." And so I invited him in. We had coffee together. By the time he left, it was morning. But he said to me on the way out, "You know, social workers and psychologists have been trying to get this out of me for 30 years. And I knew I had to be at peace with God." That man changed. It was a deep change. It's possible. No one can be written off as long as we are Christians. I'd like to end with going back to the political scene that I spoke about in the beginning, but in a good sense. 2 individuals that were so good at doing this distinction between issues and persons. I'm referring to the friendship between Antonin Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, 2 Supreme Court justices. completely different on the issues. Ginsburg was completely liberal and Scalia was completely conservative. They disagreed on everything. But they rejoiced together, they went out together, they went to the opera together, they enjoyed each other's company. They could make that distinction between the issues they believed in and the person, because the person is sacred. And when we start judging people, even if it's in our hearts alone, when we start judging people, we try to take the place of God. And there is only one God, and it's not me. May Jesus Christ be praised, both now and forever. Amen.